Evie, June, Layla, Claire, hi. And everyone else here. We just heard in the gospel how Jesus reminds us of the importance of knowing God and knowing Jesus, whom God sent to us. First Communion girls, part of your preparing for today has been learning to know God and to know Jesus. And I'm sure you do. But girls, I want to ask you a question. Do you think you could ever forget God? Do you think you could ever forget? You know, they're saying no. Oh my. I have to tell you some bad news, girls. It is possible to forget God. How do I know that? Because there have been times when I have forgotten God, when I have forgotten Jesus. And it's just possible that some of the older folks out here with us, there may have been times when they forgot God too, when they forgot Jesus. You know what? We're not the first ones to forget Jesus. Just a couple hours after Jesus prayed the words we just heard, those were words of Jesus to his friends at the Last Supper. Just a couple hours after that, Jesus was betrayed by one of his closest friends. When he needed them the most, they fell asleep and he couldn't wake them up. A few hours later, Peter, his closest friend, Peter denied that he even knew Jesus. He just had supper with Jesus. Everyone else who had been at the Last Supper table, they all ran away in fear. They forgot Jesus. Oh my. Well, that's what we had to keep in mind. Sometimes we forget God. God slips off our radar screens until, maybe Christmas or Easter or a serious problem or illness or loss comes along, or we're invited to a wedding, or we have to go to a funeral, or maybe a First Communion day like this day. And then suddenly we find ourselves back in church, singing hymns, saying prayers, listening to the scriptures, remembering God, remembering Jesus, the very one whom we might have forgotten. When such events as these bring us back to the church, we might feel awkward. We might feel unfamiliar, not sure what to do next. We might feel a little guilty or uncomfortable or nostalgic. But for anyone who's coming back to church today for this First Communion, I hope that most of all, this morning you feel welcome, that you feel at home, because this is your home. And God welcomes you here, especially if you've been away. He's especially glad to see you. Those of us who are here every Sunday, he's seen us before. But he rejoices at the ones who come back. God who never ignores us. God who never for a moment forgets any one of us. God who never lets us slip off his radar screen. God who watches over each of us day and night with eyes of love and a heart filled with mercy. So I hope today might be, for some of us, a homecoming. Not just to a building or a place, that too, but a coming back to be with God and with Jesus, whom he sent to us. I hope it's a homecoming day for all of us here, a time to reacquaint ourselves with Jesus, a time to look at these 4 beautiful girls and remember our own first communion and the whole history of our life of faith. Evie, Claire, June, Layla, your families have made a big deal about this day, huh? Yeah, a big deal. You've been talking about it, planning for it. You got new clothes, special clothes. There's probably going to be a party. And it's wonderful. This is great because it's your first communion day. It's a great day of joy and a day to celebrate. But in the middle of all that, you know what I'm thinking about, girls? I'm not so much thinking about your first communion as I'm thinking about your second communion and wondering when that will be and hoping that it will be next week, next Sunday. Not next Christmas, not next Easter, not when it's time to get confirmed, but next week. I hope your second communion is next week, followed by your third communion and your fourth communion and your fifth communion and a lifetime of communion days. Because the more we come back to communion, the more we will never forget or drift away from the presence of God and of Jesus, whom God sent to us. But there's a catch here, girls. There's a catch. You didn't drive yourselves here today. Somebody brought you, right? Yeah, because you don't walk to church anymore. And I thank you for being the reason that some people came to church today. Somebody else drove you, but you brought them. And you brought them to us, and us to them. We're grateful for that. Some people are here today and wouldn't be here if it weren't for you 4 girls. So I pray for all of us to remember God and never to forget Him. To stay in touch with Jesus, never to drift away from Him. Never to drift from the presence of God. Never to part away from the table of Jesus, who loves us, who never forgets us, who always remembers us, and who invites all of us to His table this day.